involved in social work in the past will come into the Lokya, as has happened in Sri Lanka and happening in other Buddhist worlds. The monks will become more and more worldly as they have to assume worldly responsibilities, which is how the world will probably proceed. So I think if this distinction becomes less important in the future, I think, and as women become more confident, I think this feeling of having to protect their sexuality, feeling so vulnerable and so on, which many women, I think the majority of women still feel in many non-Western countries, will become, in the end, whether you're married or not, whether you're celibate or not, it doesn't affect your spirituality. But it does, at the moment, the first step, it seems, is firstly you become celibate in order to regain control. But I hope in the future this issue will gradually disperse. But thank you.
I would make a comment for the moment. I relinquished the role of the moderator and made a quick comment, if you don't mind, Dr. Hiro. I agree with you that Buddhism, there's a sharp division between yoga, yoga, and yoga. That is the mundane world and the super mundane, if you can call it that word. But Buddha's original doctrine, he has made the point very clear. It is this world, for this world. Everywhere he says it is for this world. That is, some people may choose to become monks and nuns, but the majority of people are laymen and laywomen. Then the second thing I wanted to say is that there are two categories of monks, and I would say nuns, Gramavasi and Vanavasi, or the Grantadura or the Vipassanadura. That is, those who dwell Gramavasi, those who dwell in villages and serve the people. They work with the people. They are the community leaders of the people. They do a lot of engaged Buddhism. It is nothing new to Buddhism. It is a new interpretation that has been given by some Asian scholars who have been oriented by Western modern kind of writings, especially by Max Weber. Max Weber, who did not understand Buddhism, neither did he understand Hinduism. There was very little literature written. He said Buddhism was otherworldly, which is totally wrong. So the Brahmavasi monks worked with people. They were the community leaders. They were the physicians. They also advised the building of dams, construction of temples, and anything and everything. They were very engaged Buddhist monks from day one to now. And Vipassanadura, or that they are also the Grantadura, scholar monks. Then Vanavasi monks are more meditative monks, or the Vipassanadura, who are more meditative and who dwell in the forests. They were better respected by the people, by the laity, than the Brahmavasi monks to some extent, because they could achieve their goal of liberation much faster. Thank you. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in the Theravada context, the traditional role for the renouncers, just to follow on the point, is pariyati and patipati, which is meditation and Buddhist studies. And as I said, as Hema said, parahita, which is what the engaged Buddhists will call the work to improve and the world, something like social work, was the work for the lokia, for the lay people. So, and yeah, and the kind of a village monks who had their congregation. But there is this hierarchy, of course, and monks ideally should do both meditation and Buddhist studies, but there are monks and nuns who concentrate on the Buddhist education, Buddhist studies, and those who only meditate. And very often it is very hard to strike a balance between the two. And especially they say when you are young you have to study, because when it is late, when you are old, it is too late. But I've heard somebody saying that you have to start meditating early. When you are old, it is too late. But so I don't know. But the majority of Burmese Buddhist nuns seem to be studying at the moment, and they're fiercely trying to, that is the way of improving their social status and the religious position within the religious community. But maybe I've gone off the point. So.
Thank you, Dr. Virgo.
Thank you all for your presentations, and I want to give you the opportunity to continue with what you started, and as you said, get to the
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Questions, please. More questions or comments?
Shall I do it? Sure. Do you all really want to hear about it? Oh dear. It's actually, it seems to be the case that when I talk about this, a lot of male members in the audience seem to start, they seem to disappear, when I start talking about this. But anyway, maybe I will read a little bit from the real actual experiences of Burmese women in the villages. And I'm not sure how much time I have, but is this what you wanted to know, or? Yes? Okay. Actually, this is where one of the distortions take place, which I originally mentioned in the introduction, that anthropologists, sociologists either ignore Buddhist women in the religious hierarchy, or their information seems to be a little bit distorted, basically because they cannot get the direct information from village women who are too embarrassed or too shy to talk about their sexual experiences. So unless more women, and also it takes a very long time for them to trust you, to tell you what is really going on. For example, so you have to be very sensitive if you are going to deal with the prostitutes, or even the nuns, or even the actual experiences of village women, because obviously it is a very sensitive matter, and it does somehow bring upon a sense of shame and so on to even talk about it. So my information, the source of my information has been collected over the last decade, in the last 10 years, in intimate conversation with Burmese women. And what I am saying is the actual picture seemed to reverse the image presented by some of the male anthropologists, such as Spiro, and whose data generally seem to reflect cultural and social conceptions rather than actual real sexual experiences of village women. And in spite of his claim, probably he got his data from chatting with the village boys, village men, and so on. What does your wife do? What do you think about women's sexuality, and so on. And that's how he collected his data. And in spite of his claim, it was almost impossible to find a wild, uncontrollable, sort of a kind of a highly sexed female in a Burmese society where people consider it shameful to be even naked in front of their own spouse. This kind of a sense of very strong cultural sense of modesty is there, yet the information and this image of women being sexually loose and all that seems to go around and has been going around for a very, very long time. So there is this big, wide discrepancy between the low incidence of extramarital sex or infidelity among women, and also their assumed voracious appetite. Somehow they seem to assume that women have this voracious appetite, and often I was approached by village women asking me, do women have sexual desire at all? This is a kind of a level. Do we have sexual desire? And this is a married woman who's been forced into marriage by her parents. So probably her experience of a sexual relationship has always been a violent one or something she didn't want, with someone she didn't like. And she probably never felt anything positive of having to sleep with her, even with her husband. And this kind of thing, we just, assume that because in the West, women and men are equal, but in a cultural, social situation, there are all kinds of problems that we have to be aware of. And as I mentioned a little bit, most of the married women said to me that they endured sex as one of the marital duties, dukkha. It is one of the sufferings for women that you have to serve your husband. Sex was always initiated by the husband with little foreplay and rapid ejaculation. And since a woman's needs were dependent on her husband, who in most cases did not understand their needs, many women I spoke to did not regard it as pleasure. Some of them, as I said, even questioned me whether women had sexual desire at all, and others claimed to have little knowledge of female orgasm. Beside a proper Burmese wife, Buddhist wife, is not supposed to show her sexual desire or passion. So, this is a kind of a psychological term. She's become libidinized. She's lost the desire. And all the village women I spoke to said, well, they were very embarrassed, but anyway, they said men make decision in that sort of thing. I sort of, I just follow. And one nun who was a married woman with two young children said, if I hadn't left home then, I would still be bearing children. I would be having more and more children. Probably by now, I would have had a dozen or more. When I asked her why she didn't use contraceptives, she replied, looking embarrassed, men don't like them. And they do what they want. Don't they? And when one woman asked her, one woman asked her husband for sex, he mocked her for being a whore. So most village women I spoke to said that they complied with their husbands until they had a few number of children. And they seemed generally resigned in their reproductive role. This is their role to produce children. So this is the kind of a reality in the village, which we don't really talk about. Now, do you want me to go a little bit further, or shall I stop here?
was young, the women left the village to become prostitute, and they still do that. I've been wondering why, and just listening to her talk, I was wondering, this is in the village. The women won't talk about that sexuality with, like what she said is the same in the rural Thailand. Even among Thai educated women, they would not talk with my friend. Even unless I talk about my sexuality or whatever, then they start talking, but not every of them, very close friend. When I ask, what is the situation? Do you happy? You know this and that, they just don't want to talk about it. And I think this must be the reason, because after producing children, the women, they refuse to sleep with the husband. And this is why the husband go to prostitute. And when we talk about prostitution, the society seems to say to me that we cannot change because it's in our history. They said prostitution is part of Thai history. And I told them I don't believe it. So I think in Thailand it's very common. Husband can visit prostitute, the wife cannot say anything. So when I was in the master program, I asked my friend in the class what they think about it. And my friend personally said, I feel very happy he did that because he doesn't come bother me. So I got the answer why we still have prostitution in Thailand. And now it's become exposed to, we have tourists who come to Thailand or even this area now. And this is, also I see that how either it's indirect result of Buddhism placed upon women and men. And if we don't bring the issue up, look into how Buddhism would suppress and indirectly influence the whole issue, we cannot see how we will look into it and make change, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Vipon. Yes, please. Any other questions? Yes, please. Venerable.
When I first went to Thailand, I went to see two people, Buddhadasa Bhikkhu and Prapotilak. I was much impressed with Santi Asok. I believe the Santi Asok existed, for one thing, it was very much engaged in getting a different type of Buddhism out, and they had a printing press. And that was really, when I was there, they were just building the printing press. But I had talked to a young Samanera, the Samaneri, and we talked a little bit about different things. But what I want to know, Marija, is that as a Westerner, I could understand what they were going against. Now that after the 2 years is up, what do you envision will happen to them?
So if I understood correctly, you are interested in what I think will happen to them after the suspension. Well, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm in Thailand, because I'm also a little bit curious to see what will happen now. I've been always trying to instigate them to no, you change back to the ropes and you go everywhere. But actually, they have become very modest or something. I actually invited some of the Sikhamats here. I was even willing to sponsor maybe 2 Sikhamats to come to this conference because they've been to some earlier conferences. But they are still, in a way, a little bit scared, and they just said that Prapotilak doesn't want to promote the Sikhamats because they are scared that there will be the thing that they're most scared of is actually that the state will start a new trial, accuse them for something else. And that's why they want to have very low profile now and be very careful. So I don't think they will change into, even maybe not back to brown robes. But I haven't interviewed, I just arrived a couple of days ago in Santi Asok last year, so I haven't interviewed them about that yet. But at least the Sikhamats, who, by the way, I didn't have time to say that the Sikhamats have been declared innocent in the appeals court now in October, November. The monks are still guilty for imitating the monks, pretending to be monks. But as there are no bhikshuni in Thai society, the sikkhamats are not accused of anything, so actually they are free. Because under the suspended centers, they didn't even have the passport, so I didn't invite them earlier. But as soon as I heard that they are free, declared innocent, then they theoretically could get passports and come to Cambodia. But they themselves, at least the women, seem to be a little bit scared, and they just want to be left alone, actually. And they just, in a way, I have the feeling that the whole group does not want to expand so much. And they don't want to, sometimes of course they talk about that the whole Thailand is Santiasok and so on, but actually they don't really want to expand too much, and they don't want to have millions of members. What they always emphasize is that the centers we have, the 6-7 centers, that they should be good communities, they should be properly done, and the supporters that they have, that they really understand what the monastics are preaching about, that is more important for them than to have millions or hundreds of thousands of supporters. More important to have supporters who really understand what they want and what they teach. Another thing that I have been thinking of is of course that it started to grow when it was banned. So let's see what happens now, and then it's free. It's really going to, people will start to look for something more exciting when this group is now legal. We'll see. I'm curious to see that too.
One thing I saw when I was there is that the Chinese Sangha supported Yen Shik from the Chinese Sangha there in Thailand. They always went with them because they're vegetarian too.
Yes, they have this, as I said, they're fiercely vegetarian, which means that they, for instance, almost worship Kuan Yin in Santiasok because Kuan Yin is vegetarian. And they also like Sai Baba, because Sai Baba is vegetarian, and they like, I think even Anand Marg, all sorts of groups. They're very tolerant to all outside groups as long as they are vegetarian. And it's true that they have had quite a lot of foreign visitors, actually, particularly from China. Some of the monks and the sikkhamats can speak Mandarin Chinese also, and many speak Teochew and Hainanese, and so they have had a lot of visitors particularly from the Chinese world, because they appreciate the Chinese monks for being vegetarian, or the Mahayana monks being vegetarian. But at the same time, they are also then always pointing out the Mahayana monks as a bad example for being monks who are married, and that's because they are really quite strict about the sexual affairs also. I mean, for instance, in Thailand, there have been quite a few sex scandals among the monks during the last 10 years. They have fathered children and so on, visited prostitutes. But as far as I have been in Santiasok, I have never come across with any scandals, in that sort of scandals in Santiasok. So one thing that I should maybe say about Santiasok is that they really practice what they preach.
So my question is somehow relevant to what the Venerable has already asked. I also visited a center there in Thailand, and one thing that struck me much was this huge picture, painted picture, in which there is a sea of suffering, where dragons and fish are all getting suffocated. And there comes this beautiful picture of Avalokiteshvara, Kanyuin, one of the Kanyuin, the Avalokiteshvara coming on to sort of enlighten the whole darkened world. And to me, the interpretation, if I'm able to say, is somehow very related to some of the sutra texts found in Mahayana tradition, and some of the ways that the believers practice strong vegetarian diet and emphasis on layman's work and contribution and making service to the society seems to me a very similar characteristics that we can find in some of the Mahayana traditions, especially in the modern world. And I wonder if that is one form of Mahayana being introduced to Theravada-based Thai society, or I was just struck with this phenomenon, and I wanted to hear from you in relation to the Mahayana context. Thank you.
Yes, that is why I mentioned this Kuan Yin too. It has struck me too that they are, and I've actually even mentioned it to themselves, that they seem to be going closer and closer to Mahayana in some extent, particularly the diet. But as I mentioned, there are some other aspects in Mahayana which they do not accept. But I wouldn't say that they are introducing Mahayana, because they do come from a Theravada Buddhist tradition, but they have been critical to the misconduct of the monks and the magic animistic practices that have been so prominent in the Theravada tradition in Thailand. So I wouldn't really say that, indicate that there are some sort of spies coming to Thailand to introduce Mahayana. And on the other hand, it was interesting yesterday to hear from the Venerable Bhikshunis from Sri Lanka that there's this same accusation that now when women are fully ordained, then the Theravada Buddhist establishment, which is always closely related to the state, comes with the accusation that you're Mahayana, you're going to introduce Mahayana to our pure Theravada Buddhist country and so on. So there are some similarities in that. But it is interesting that, but what I have heard from Prapotirak is that he wants to unite. This is one of his principles. He wants to unite the two sects, the Dhammayut and Mahanikai, and also he wants to unite, in a way, the Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism, because in the time of Buddha, there were no Mahayana Buddhists and Theravada Buddhists. So he wants to go back to the basics and back to the roots. And talking about the pictures, it is quite fascinating to look around in their centers at the pictures. As I mentioned, they don't really have Buddha images. But what they have is the picture of Kuan Yin in many places, no statues, but just sort of cheap-looking pictures from calendars or something. And but they don't really have any explanation. When I ask, why do you have that picture there? Then they just say that it's because she's vegetarian. But then now there are some other interesting phenomena also, that they also have nowadays pictures of Mickey Mouse and all these Walt Disney figures on the walls. And if I try to ask, why do you have them? It's beautiful, they're cute. And on the other hand, because now they have these children in the centers, the schools, so they try to decorate the schools a little bit accordingly for the children. So you can really find all sorts of pictures there. Last winter when I arrived there around the Christmas time again, and then many friends of mine came to visit me in January, we still had a Santa Claus and a Christmas tree in Santiago. And all the Finns wanted to be photographed with the Santa Claus, because Santa Claus comes from Finland. So, I mean, everything is possible. There's the picture of the king, there's the picture of Buddhadasa, there's the picture of Prapotirak, of course, and then there's the Santa Claus. So they are quite liberal in that sense, but one should not maybe take draw too serious conclusions about that. It's just one way of being liberal, maybe.
Yes, I just wanted to comment that I also have done a little bit of study on Santia Sok, and when I questioned Potirak actually about vegetarianism, where he got the inspiration for that, he did tell me it was from Mahayana Buddhism. So, I mean, I appreciate the fact that he wants to unify the two, but at the same time, I think the influence of Mahayana Buddhism is quite strong. And I wanted to ask you, Maria, actually about this principle that you have to have 4 monks to 1 sikamat. I mean, considering the strong role of the lay women in Santya Sok, I've noticed when I went to some of the communities, for example, in Isan, where women are really taking a leading role. I mean, now the lay women in organizing the communities and in ecological agriculture and all these things, considering that, it would seem to me that Potirak would have to acknowledge the strong influence of the women, perhaps in modifying some of his monastic rules. I mean, what's your comment on that, please?
Thank you. Yes, of course, that was also one thing that struck me when I arrived there, that why are there these restrictions to the number of the sikamats, when at the same time some people claim that there are 200 ladies in waiting, sort of 200 ladies waiting to become sikamats, which is pretty hopeless when the number of the monks is still only around 100 and has always been around that 90, 100, 110, but then they resign and then so on. But I think one of the reasons why he doesn't want to have 100 sikamats in the group is not to challenge the state, because as I said, there is no Bhikshuni order, and they are very careful to point it out when they were arrested, for instance. Then they were just, and when the nuns were arrested, then they were just repeating that they're not Bhikshuni, they're not Bhikshuni, you can't arrest them, they are not guilty of anything, because they don't claim to be Bhikshuni. So the more this is, I mean, their interpretation, the more they promote the sikamat, the more they are scared that the state would start to claim that they are trying to build up a Bhikshuni group, Bhikshuni order. But another reason is maybe then that I would imagine, because that they just for male practical reasons don't want to have 100 nuns in the same place. I mean, you can imagine that it would change the whole situation. And then maybe again there's the risk that that society or the mainstream would start to laugh at them, and that you have only ladies, you have only lady followers, and all these things. So it's possible that there are all these reasons. And then talking about the 200 ladies in waiting, it's in a way true that there are approximately 200 ladies registered as temple guests and temple residents, which theoretically leads later to become a sort of aspirant and later on sikamat. But of those 200, there's a lot of mobility to start with. That people come and go, and then not all of those 200 want to become sikamats, because they see that it's too difficult. That is the normal way of putting it always. It's too difficult to be a sikamat. So there are many of them are, as you mentioned, very actively working in the Buddhist, in the centers, with agriculture and this and that. But not all of them want to become sikamats. They are quite happy with the status that they have now, and they're sort of more free to work. As sikamats, there are these limits then that you can't really work with agriculture actually, because you might kill some animals and so on. So or even serious gardening and so on. So it's one reason that they don't all want to become sikamats. But as I said, now it's going to be interesting to see where the group is going from now, because the big change has just occurred now that they are again free. So let's see where they go. I really don't know, can't predict.
I have a question for the Venerable Arya. I don't know much about Theravada nuns, and particularly not about Burma and the Burma situation. So what I know is actually only what I read from Coco's paper and her lecture. And listening to that, I have a question for you based on this categorization of nuns within the nunnery, which seems to be based on the criteria of virginity. What I understand is that Burmese women within their own families or within their own social contexts, people know whether they are a virgin or not, because when they sleep with a man, they are considered to be married, right? When virginity is a criteria of entering, and correct me if that is not the case, I wonder how they deal with this when Western women apply. I mean, maybe I'm now getting, I feel a little bit uncomfortable asking these questions, right? So if you don't want to say anything about it, please, then don't. As an anthropologist, though, I'm very curious. And especially where we get this mixing between Western women and, how to call them, born Buddhists. So I was curious, how can you tell me how your teachers went about on this matter? Or whether this was ignored completely, was it just assumed that you were, let's say, a big virgin? Or are they making an exception for Western women? How are they dealing with this? With women they don't know, who don't fit in their own society?
Well, what Coco Kawanami mentioned about that virginity was one special nunnery in Rangoon. And I think, as far as I know, it's not the criteria in every nunnery. It's not the criteria in all the places to ordain as a nun. Like, for example, where I ordained in the meditation center, it wasn't a matter. I wasn't asked or they didn't try to find out about it. Not at all. It didn't matter at all. And also for Burmese women who come to the center and want to ordain there, it's not a criteria at all. So it might be a criteria in some places, like that learning nunnery, but not in all places.
Well, then I turn with my question back to Coco and ask her whether these nunneries where you have been working, which seem to have this criteria, whether these are open to Western women who want to become nuns.
Actually, this is a very good question because in my research, of course, maybe Donya Nyasari-chan is the most renowned nunnery in terms of its high standard of Buddhist education. Virginity is a must. And here you have to see in the history of Burmese Buddhist nuns that as they become more and more educated, they have the emphasis on virginity has increased. In the past, especially the way I look at it, and I have collected oral stories from these nuns, but it was not as much of an issue. Of course, virginity is respected, but for the nuns, it has become more and more of an issue as they advance in their Buddhist studies, as they become more and more educated. And there seems to be some kind of a correlation. And when you also look at the structure of the Buddhist community, the hierarchy is that the highest, both monks and nuns, the highest monks and nuns are those who pursue pariyatti. This is the Buddhist studies. And subtly, they say, well, this is for those who are gifted, who have the special quality, so that, not everyone can do it. It doesn't matter whether you are from a rich family or a poor family, you have to have a special quality to pursue Buddhist education, because it is very rigorous. And those who have chosen the path, or those who remain to be an educated nun or a monk, seem to be those who are virgins, and they also, maybe, I don't know which comes first, but they claim their superiority in the hierarchy. And often, this is to tell you the truth, it is not very easy for foreigners to go into a pariyati institution if they always send you to a meditation center, like the pariyati, patipati, then comes meditations. But, I tried very hard to get into the pariyati center. Of course, I was not married then, and which is 12 years ago. So, but there seems to be a subtle ranking that they place this kind of, the virgin nuns, the virgin monks, the ones who are educated at the top of the pyramid. And it becomes, the rules and regulations become less as you go down. But they don't tell you about the hierarchy. When you go to Burma, they tell you to go to this meditation center or that meditation center.
So, okay, I have a question for Coco. At the very beginning of your speech, you said that Western students you have wouldn't understand the real value of celibacy and for the nuns living there. And I wanted to ask you, were you speaking about the nowadays West, or do you think there is some difference between the way that the East sees celibacy, virginity, and all this, and the way the Western tradition see it? I mean, in the Christian, or at least in the Catholic tradition, celibacy is linked with purity and virginity as well. So do you think there is some difference in the way of perceiving it, or are you just speaking of the 20th century West? So it's...
Well, I don't really want to say this is the Western attitude, this is the non-Western attitude. But what I didn't talk about today, and again going back to Hema's point, is brahmacharya, the notion of sexual abstinence, is really the most fundamental notion in early Buddhism and in Theravada Buddhism, that you give up sex and you have total control. So it's not just purity, but it is total control, mentally and physically, over your own senses and desires. That's like, it is one step forward. And I think the tradition of Buddhist asceticism, which shares its history with Hinduism, has always, as you have read Spomberg's book on Buddhism and sexuality and so on, has always, in a way, excluded women, because it was a special privilege for the male monks to be able to remain celibate, that is to abstain from sex. And there are all kinds of, connotations which I didn't really develop, that women cannot possibly abstain from sex because they have, what do they have to abstain? They lack an organ to work on that. It's almost a very masculine ascetic tradition that has been carried on, which is very much related to the notion of power and spiritual, potency. the notion that you have total control over it, and not any lay person can do it, not even a layman can do it. And in order to do that, if you look at the ordination procedures, a monk has to be fully sexually, a candidate has to be fully sexually competent. A homosexual is not allowed. He has to be physically fit, sexually competent. He has to have everything to renounce, and then achieve this full control over oneself, desires, and so on. So the starting point, the notion of celibacy goes back all the way to the initial early notion of brahmacharya and so on. So it's I shouldn't just jump to the Western notion, because also as you said, in the early Catholicism, there is a kind of similar sort of reality. So West means just the last few decades, right? I mean, in which maybe after the 60s, when sex has suddenly become liberated. It's so I have to be a little bit careful with saying that, trying to compare. Thank you.
Any more questions, please? Oh, Venerable Lekshi.
Coco, when you say that homosexuals are not allowed to be ordained in Burma, is this explicit in the text, or perhaps could you be referring to the precept or the precondition that a hermaphrodite cannot be ordained?
I have checked the Burmese. I haven't checked the original sources, but I know that in the Burmese literature and in the Burmese translation, they are fiercely against homosexuality. But at the same time, if I am going back to this notion of women not having any kind of a sexual sort of orientation which is autonomous, does that, I would like to ask Venerable Lekshe that how would they define homosexuality for women if there are all these notions of women having no sexual desires in reality, but in the text they are voraciously sexually tempting or
Well, because the precept reads that for a fully ordained monk or nun, and since the novices are in training, I suppose it would be the same, are not to engage in any sexual activity with any of the orifices. So I would presume that, it is presumed by the traditions, as far as I am aware, that no homosexuality or autoeroticism is permitted by men or women.
Thank you. Yes. Machi from Thailand would like to speak.
ทุกท่านนะคะก็วันนี้อยากจะพูดเกี่ยวกับเรื่องสันติอโศกที่กล่าวมาเกี่ยวกับเรื่องพระโพธิลักษณ์นั้นคือที่พระโพธิลักษณ์ที่ถูกจับศึกไปเกี่ยวกับทางคณะสงฆ์ไทยก็เกี่ยวกับที่การบวชคือพระโพธิลักษณ์นี้ไม่ได้แต่งตั้งให้เป็นพระอุปชฌาย์บวชพระและจึงมีปัญหาตรงนี้ถึงได้จับศึกเกี่ยวกับเรื่องอันนี้แล้วพระโพธิลักษณ์ไม่คือยังทำอยู่เรื่อยๆก็เลยทางคณะสงฆ์ก็เลยมีการฟ้องขึ้นมา
She just like to add information about Santi Asok. The Bodhirak he was sued, and the case was that he keep ordination without having permission, because it's only certain monk who can give ordination. So when he did that, they told him that it was wrong because he was not qualified. But he keep doing that. That's why they said then you cannot be a Buddhist monk because you don't follow their ordination or the rules. So you want to add that?
ส่วนการปฏิบัติอย่างอื่นนั้นทางคณะสงฆ์หรือทางประชาชนทั่วไปก็ไม่มีการตำหนิอะไรก็สนับสนุนที่การทำดีแล้วก็การฉันอาหารมังสวิรัตินั้นวัดต่างๆก็มีหลายวัดที่เขาก็ฉันอาหารมังสวิรัติก็มีอยู่
For that practice, generally many monks and nuns and also the public in general also admire the Santi Asok. She also like to add that actually in many monastery and nunnery, monks and nuns also prefer eating vegetarian. It's not only Santi Asok group.
แล้วการใช้ชีวิตอย่างเรียบง่ายคือเดินเท้าเปล่าไม่ใส่รองเท้านั้นก็เกี่ยวกับพระที่อยู่เป็นคามวาสีอรัญญวาสีคือพระที่อยู่ในบ้านกับที่อยู่ในป่าที่ปฏิบัติธรรมอันนี้ก็มีอยู่ทั่วๆไปในประเทศไทยมีอยู่
Also simple living monks and nuns, the forest monk we also have a lot around the country also.
แล้วก็เรื่องของสถานภาพของแม่ชีไทยนั้นปัจจุบันนี้แม่ชีก็มีการจัดตั้งเป็นสถาบันมูลนิธิสถาบันแม่ชีไทยในพระบรมราชินูปถัมภ์ให้มีการสนับสนุนเรื่องการศึกษาการปฏิบัติธรรมให้กับคณะแม่ชี
I'd like to add a little bit information on the position or status of Thailand. The Nun Institute is sponsored by the Queen, and we've been trying to give lots of training and education service to the nun.
คือทางสถาบันพยาให้กับแม่ชีที่อยู่ทั่วไปได้มีโอกาสศึกษาแล้วก็ศึกษาทางธรรมทางสายสามัญทางวิชาชีพต่างๆแล้วก็ปัจจุบันนี้ก็เรียนในระดับมหาวิทยาลัยได้
They were giving 3 types of education. It's Dhamma practice, a normal education where they can go to non-formal education, and also the income generating the skill so that they can either when they disrobe or they still in temple, at least they can help themselves economically. They have a few nuns that the institute help them to go through university level now, or college level.
อย่างแม่ชีที่เรียนจบธรรมะมาแล้วก็ทางสถาบันก็เป็นผู้ประสานงานหาทุนขอโครงการต่างๆมาจัดอบรมครูสอนให้กับแม่ชีเพื่อจะกลับไปเป็นครูสอนในวัดแต่ละวัด
And the nuns who graduate from college or from high school, they also train them more in other area, and then look for fun for them so they can go back and train other nuns or establish themselves.
แล้วก็มีการจัดอบรมแม่ชีเพื่อเป็นครูสอนเด็กในศูนย์พัฒนาเด็กเล็กในวัดต่างๆ
Another project is they give training to nuns how to teach preschool children, so that when they go back and live in the temple, they can take care of the preschool project.
ก็จัดอบรมแม่ชีที่จะไปสอนเด็กในเวลาปิดภาคเรียนภาคฤดูร้อน
Another project they do is giving training to nuns so that nuns can conduct during summer vacation in rural area. The parents and the teachers they can still carry the tradition where they send the kids secondary school or elementary school to stay in the temple. So they call it like a summer Dhamma school or something for 3 months or 2 months. So nuns are trained on how to give a proper training, so that then when the school and the villagers put the kids in the temple during summer vacation, they can give a proper training to the kids.
ในวิชาที่สอนเราก็ยังได้เพิ่มวิชาเกี่ยวกับการสอนทางด้านเคหะพยาบาลแล้วก็สอนสาธารณสุขแล้วก็สอนเกี่ยวกับสมุนไพรเพื่อที่จะไปใช้เวลาที่เราไปอบรมเด็กแล้วมีปัญหาจะได้เอาไปใช้ในนั้นได้
They train the nun on health, counseling, and also on herbal medicines, because in rural area a lot of people they still use it, or also not only old people still use it, but for the new generation, the popularity of using herbal medicine is declined. So the nuns also give training to nuns on how to revive this herbal or self-care.
แล้วปัจจุบันแม่ชีก็มีโอกาสที่จะไปทำงานทางด้านศาสนาได้มากขึ้นค่ะเกี่ยวกับสอนที่ไปสอนอบรมผู้อยู่ในคุก
Also now the nuns they start a program to send nuns to teach Dhamma for the prisoner.
แล้วก็เด็กที่ทางรัฐบาลรับไปเลี้ยงเด็กยากจนอะไรได้เข้าไปอบรมในนั้นด้วย
Also they also go and teach Dhamma to the orphanage of different organizations run by the government to take care of the homeless boy or homeless girl. The nuns also go into this area and teach them Dhamma.
ว่าทางสถาบันแม่ชีไทยเราทางคณะแม่ชีไทยคิดว่าเราจะพยายามที่จะอบรมแม่ชีตรงนี้ให้มีความรู้ความสามารถให้ประชาชนยอมรับแล้วการเป็นภิกษุณีหรือไม่นั้นก็คือในอนาคตประชาชนเขาจะยอมรับเอง
The nun institute think that what they want to do most is to train these nuns for them to have confidence and have ability and have skills so that when they go out and contribute their ability to society, so the issue of bhikkhuni it will be in the future. Once you establish the confidence among the public and their support, then we can bring in the bhikkhuni issue into Thai society, I think.
Thank you very much, Venerable Sister and Vipon. I guess we could wind up the session with some announcements. I have a few announcements to make. T-shirts are available, as you see. So please, and also may I mention that they are given at almost a cost price. Then the photographs, as you see, are also available, and there would not be much time left if you do not order pretty soon. And each is 500 real. That again is given at exactly at the cost price, and that means you can have 7 photographs for $1. 7 photographs for $1. Otherwise, you can pay for each 500 real. Then there is a session which is being organized at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Of course, the laywomen can present their projects, whatever projects that you have developed or you are developing, you can present their projects at 3 o'clock. And please give your names, anybody who is interested in presenting a project, please give the name to Venerable Lekshi. Then my last announcement, I would like to introduce Dr. Thonawat, my colleague from the Buddhist Institute. He is our consultant librarian at the Buddhist Institute. He has an announcement to make.
This is not a question, but a request. And as Thomas said, I am the librarian of the Buddhist Institute, which is next door to this temple. Some of you have been there already. This is a request for book donation, since the Institute has got just a small budget for book purchasing. So we would like to ask you, you are now here,
We have brought books.
present books, and we are now building or rebuilding the collection of the library. So, for example, on women and Buddhism, we have just 8 books. 5 books from the weird publication of Sri Lanka, Kandi, Sri Lanka, on women, life of women in the time of Buddha, women and sexuality, and 2 books mentioned by Miss
Rita
by
Gross. Rita Gross. Yes.
Rita Gross in Buddhism after patriarchy. So that's all we have in the library. But besides this, we would like to have also books on Buddhism and women and general culture on your country, or on all the countries represented here. So when you are back home, you could send the books at this address. We just put Buddhist Institute Library, P.O. Box 1047. I say it again. P.O. Box 1047, Phnom Penh, Cambodia.
And there's the exhibition.
If you got some books with you here, you could give them to me in the library, or we have there over there a small display or exhibition on of books on Cambodia literature, a little bit of religion and art, culture, history,